deeper you go, the more it stinks, and the deeper you go, the more you cry. But ultimately, when you get it all minced and diced and put into food, the onion really enhances the flavor. And that's a good analogy for what Social Security is. You got to get past the stink, you got to get past the crying, you got to get past the layers, but it's pretty amazing. Because I think we can all agree, especially working with this population, that working and earning money really is the powerful tool to be such a valued member of the American society, and no one should be excluded from having the opportunity to do that. Now, I've been around too long. I asked Vanessa not to necessarily tell you how long I've been around, but I've been around, and what I find often is people know that Social Security gives benefits, but they might not be too clear that there's more than one benefit that they receive. So before we get started on the SSI part, I want to kind of define Social Security's benefits as being this big umbrella of Title II. Okay, there's Title II and there's Title 16. Under Title II, there are many programs. There's non-disabled programs, there's disabled programs, such as I pay FICA tax. So when I retire, which is coming soon, I will be eligible for a check. If I pass away and I have children under the age of 18, they get a check, disability or not. But Thursday, we're going to focus on the three that are under the disability-related benefits, and that's childhood disability benefits, Social Security disability insurance, and disabled widowers benefits. You can forget those till Thursday. I'm just showing you now that there's more than one benefit. And we're going to focus today on supplemental security income, and that's what most people know. It's SSI. Where our program under Work Incentive Planning and Assistance, the WIPA program, comes into play is we offer free services. Every county has one assigned. I'm going to show you Thursday how to find who your WIPA is, but you never want to use this information I'm giving you today and assume somebody has SSI, because you're going to find out Thursday that not everybody has SSI. Now, Social Security has this definition, and I want you to kind of understand what this is. You don't have to know this. I'm going to point out the slides when you have to know that you know that you know this. This is just information for you to refer back to. So people on Title II and SSI who are over the age of 18 have to have a disability that a medical professional or mental health professional has diagnosed, and they have to, given that disability, be unable to go to work and earn a certain level. Now, I'm not going to get into it too deep today because we're going to dig there Thursday, but there's a myth that people, if they aren't on Social Security benefits, can't work. And that's just not true. They can be working and still apply for benefits. It's all about how much can you earn, and of that earnings, how much are they going to count? The third part of the definition is it's also going to result in death within 12 months, or the disability will last at least a period of 12 consecutive months. Depending on when you get a disability, sorry, I fumbled there. When you're found to have a disability, then Social Security puts you in 3 categories, depending on the expectancy to recover. So I had a friend who was in a motorcycle accident that was pretty bad, and he was down for a couple of years. So he got benefits, but he was medical improvement expected. I knew at some point he was going to be off of benefits. And then there's medical improvement possible. They don't know for sure, but they're going to check every 3 to 5 years. And then there's people who have IDD or let's see, Down syndrome is on the list, who medical improvement is not expected. So they're only going to be reviewed every 5 to 7 years. And this is just a way of making sure that they still carry the definition of disability. One of the things that's going to be important for you today, so this is something that you need to understand, is when you have a child, because you can be an infant and get SSI, okay? So SSI can be given to children under the age of 18 or older. I'm just put here because we're talking about transition age youth. And it's the same thing. A doctor has to find them to have a disability that's expected to last the same duration. But the difference between the adult definition and the children's definition is they do not focus on work, because you're not going to tell a 5-year-old how much can you go to work and earn. So they're looking at more how it impacts their daily life. Again, you don't need to know that. You do need to know, and I'll point it out again, that when someone's on SSI as a child and they turn 18, remember, there's another definition for an adult on SSI. So that's going to be a big critical factor when a child turns 18, because at 18, that's kind of the magic number where you're suddenly not a child anymore, regardless of your disability. Now with SSI, no one has paid into the system. Remember, I talked to you about me paying in FICA tax to get my retirement? That's a different program. This program means that you have limited income and limited resources. So you have a need for that supplemental cash to take care of yourself. And this is funded by the general tax revenue. You know, they're talking right now about, you know, stopping the payroll tax or whatever. We have to be really careful, because when we do that, we're also impacting the Social Security check. Now, because SSI is a needs-based benefit, like I said, there's limited income and limited resources. The income level usually increases every year. This resource limit of $2,000 for an individual hasn't changed since Moses brought down the 10 Commandments, and I don't expect it to change anytime soon. Now, when you see $2,000, that's not cash in the bank, that's not the house you live in. It's kind of, there's exclusions to it. Yes, you cannot have more than $2,000 in the bank. That is a true statement. But you can have a house and the land that's on the deed to the house. All of that is an exclusion. And there are many other exclusions that I don't have time to explain today. But know that their bank account cannot go over $2,000, or else they will stop getting their SSI check and their Medicaid. Now, as I said, the cash benefit goes up every year, usually, depending on the economy. So this year, the highest that an SSI check can be is $783 if you're an individual. And if you're an eligible couple both on SSI, the most it can be is $1,175. Now look at that difference. If I'm single and on SSI, I get $783, but if I get married, I only get $1,175. So there's kind of a marriage disincentive there. And one of the things we're going to wrap up today is the insurance that goes along with SSI is Medicaid. And that's like the brass ring on the merry-go-round. Everybody wants it. And we are fortunate in Texas that Medicaid is automatic. In some other states, you might have to apply, you might have to spend down, but in Texas, if you're eligible for SSI, you are eligible for Medicaid. Now, I know we're here to talk about work, but there's a lot of nuts and bolts that if they're not in place, work doesn't even matter, and they're going to lose their SSI check and their Medicaid. So I'm going to go through a few of these, and then I'm going to stop for questions. The reason I haven't stopped for questions yet is some of that stuff is just for information. I'm going to be drilling down when I want you to know something, okay? So here's the first thing that you need to know. There's a lot that goes into SSI because it's a needs-based program. So we're going to look at these 5 areas that could affect the check also, and the person may never be going to work. So let's look at what some of these are. Okay, there's something called deeming with SSI, and you'll notice I have parent to child bold and underlined because that's the one we're going to talk about. And what that says is, I have a child who has a disability. I don't have a disability. My husband doesn't have a disability, but my child does. What Social Security says is, because this is a needs-based program, my income and resources should be deemed available to that child. So they have a special calculation sheet that they do that determines how much of my income and resources should be made available to that child. So the child could be ineligible just because we have too much income and resources. This is one spot that is teachers and teaching professionals that you may run into. You'll have this parent group and you'll talk about going to work, and they'll say, well, I can't even get my child on benefits. And you can clearly see how her disability is impacting her daily life, but this child is 16. And so maybe it has nothing to do with the disability. It's all about the parents having too much income or too many resources. And also what you need to know about deeming, and you don't need to know this, but kind of have it in your toolbox for when parents are frustrated with Social Security. If I had a divorce and my husband was paying my ex-husband was paying child support, 2/3 of that child support will also reduce the SSI check. Because it's a needs-based program, they look at any other income that's coming in to that child so they don't have to use tax dollars to pay. Now, when there is a deeming situation, the resource limit does go up. The child still gets $2,000. If it's a single parent, the parent gets an additional $2,000, and if it's a two-parent home, then it's $3,000 for a total maximum of $5,000 in resources. Now, parent to child deeming stops at 18, and if I had time to put up a quiz, I'd ask you why that is. But the answer is because at age 18, regardless of your disability and your living circumstances, you are an adult. And this is parent to child deeming. You're no longer a child. Now, if the parents also are on SSI, there is no deeming. Then it's just a household of people on SSI. Okay? So I said when the child turns 18, deeming stops. So now what happens? Because their living situation is important, because the SSI cash benefit is given to supplement food, edible food, and shelter. Okay? So when the child turns 18, they switch from deeming to this thing called in-kind support and maintenance. Or if they start getting their benefit after the age of 18, they start here on in-kind support and maintenance. So then it says, are you paying your fair share of the edible food and housing? So for easy math, let's say there's 4 people in a home, a mom, a dad, a brother, and a sister. And let's say the sister is on SSI. And let's say total, because I don't do math in public, and this is kind of public. Let's say their total edible food, mortgage, utilities, basic utilities come to $1,000. So the fair share would be determined by dividing that by the number of people in the household, which is 4. So 250 would be her fair share that she would have to pay her parents in every month to keep a full SSI check. Okay, now you don't have to be related. My neighbor can be living with me, my friend can be living with me, I could have a brand new baby that's 3 days old who's living in the house. It's just the number of people that reside under that roof. Here's what's important about in-kind support and maintenance. After a child turns 18, and they're on SSI, if the parent does not charge them anything for food and shelter, Social Security will automatically take 1/3 of the SSI check. So this year, the most an SSI check can be is $783. If a parent doesn't charge them for food and shelter, the highest their check can be is $522. So you're going to ask me, because I've done this a couple hundred times, well, how do we fix that? All they have to do is report to Social Security showing a receipt, showing any kind of proof that they've paid the $250 in the situation that I showed you, and then they will change the check to $783. Now, Social Security is not going to ask the parents what they're going to do with that $250. They can turn around and buy their daughter a whole new wardrobe or whatever they want for the $250. But there has to be an exchange of cash so that they can come up with the full $783. Okay, I'm going to stop here in a minute, Vanessa, if you want to get ready. Also, if they can show that their name is on the lease, they're paying their fair share, they have some degree of ownership, they can also get the full check. So it's not just paying that if they have owner responsibility. So the other one, and then I'm going to stop for questions, is called the 12-month suspension period. What that says is something happens that I am over the resource limit or somebody else is paying for my food and shelter. Well, who would that be? Well, you know, let's say you have somebody who's 18, 19, 20, whatever, you know, 30, 31, and they get arrested. When you go to jail, your food and shelter is taken care of. If you go to any kind of non-Medicaid facility where your food and shelter is taken care of, your SSI check will stop, and so will your Medicaid. So if you're over resources, or you're in a facility, or you're no longer paying for your food and shelter outside of the ISM that we just talked about, yeah, you will not get an SSI check or your Medicaid. And they call it a 12-month suspension period because let's say I am incarcerated. Okay, they're going to stop my check when I'm incarcerated. But if I get out on the 10th month and I report to Social Security that I'm now out, they will start up my check and my Medicaid again because it happened within 12 months. If I am in jail for 14 months, I will be terminated after the 12th month of being in the facility. Same with if I'm over resources. If I go over resources, I have 12 months to spend it down, but during that 12 months, you're not going to get your SSI check and you're not going to get your Medicaid. So I'm telling you this, and I'm using it last because I want you to hear me say this. So when you're meeting with parents, make sure that they're not leaving a lump sum large amount of money to their children, especially the child on SSI, because that's going to automatically stop Medicaid and SSI. And a lot of the people that we work with are high Medicaid users. So that's not a good thing. So there's ABLE account, there's special needs trust, there's other ways of saving and giving people on SSI money. But if they're over resources, again, if they get under resources within that 12-month period, Social Security will stop it. But if the money is so high, after 12 months, they're terminated. And all that money is going to Medicaid because Medicaid is expensive. So at this point, Vanessa, I'm going to stop to see if there's any questions.
All right, Sandy. So we do have, it looks like 3 questions.
Okay.
The first question is deeming for under 18 or both?
It's under 18 only for parent-child deeming. However, I did not talk about spouse-to-spouse deeming because this is transitional age presentation. But if I'm married to someone who isn't on benefits on SSI and I am, it's the same situation. His income and resources would be deemed to me. So, but in this scenario, they have to be under the age of 18.
Okay.
Because when they turn 18, they go to paying their fair share. They go to that slide. Okay.
All right, next question. Can you please review how the stimulus check impacts the over 18 SSI money?
It pays there's no effect. Because this is the economy, and it's my understanding, I don't know this to be true, but I can check, but I don't think there's any impact.
Okay. Next question. Is there a type of account that is exempt from the resource limit?
Is there any kind of, I'm sorry, I was writing, is there any kind of account that is exempt from the resource limit? Yes, the special needs trust is exempt, ABLE is exempt, and you can Google special needs trust attorneys, and the parents can get some good information there. But you don't want to just go to any lawyer. You want to go to a lawyer who does specialize in special needs trust. And you just need to Google ABLE account, and that'll give the parent information there too, because you have to save for specific areas. And those are the two that come to my mind. Was that three or is that two?
That was three. There's others that has come in. Do you want to take some of those?
Yeah, let's take one or two more because I still have to keep moving, but keep your questions going.
Okay. If the parent obtained guardianship, will it still considered in the deeming? Is it still considered in the deeming?
Are you talking about the guardianship of an adult or the guardianship of a child?
So Elke Santosa, it just says, if the parent obtained guardianship, will it still be considered in the deeming?
Okay, yeah, so let me just give, and if this isn't right, go ahead and ask the question and I can get back after the presentation and answer it. But a parent usually doesn't have to get guardianship of children under the age of 18. It's usually assumed that they are the guardian. Social Security usually doesn't let kids manage their own benefits. So there's usually some level of guardianship payee status. So I would just need more information on that question. So if you can type it again, we probably won't get back to it today, but I will get you an answer if you can just give more clarity of the situation.
Okay.
Okay, let's do one more, Vanessa.
Okay. My school is residential. Food and shelter are paid for. Is SSI suspended for our adult students?
Your school is residential. You know, in my 20 years, I've never been asked that. School is residential and it's provided. And so they're not paying for their food and shelter? It's all free?
It just says food and shelter are paid for. Is SSI suspended for the adult students?
It depends on who's paying for the food and shelter. So again, I would need more clarity to answer that question.
Okay.
Okay, so if she can do that, then I can answer the question, but I kind of need to keep moving.
Okay.
So now you have somebody who's never received SSI benefits. Remember I talked to you about the parent who said, you know, Social Security doesn't like me. My child clearly has a disability, but they deny me. It's usually because of deeming. Well, the secret is when that child turns 18, that's a wonderful time to apply, okay? And, you know, here's some details about it. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time about it except to talk about what your role is. So your role would be to tell the parents, hey, your child's turning age 18, so your deeming will stop. So let's go ahead and apply because, as you're going to hear in a few minutes, when they turn 18, the parents' income and resources no longer count. They just count their income and resources. And are they paying their fair share? So where you also play a factor in is the parents will have to fill out some information, as you can see on bullet 3, and you may be providing some of that school information. What does the IEP look like? And any other documents you might have, you know, the 504 plan, you know, getting information on what's happening within schools to help them determine that, yes, there is a disability. Now, for the students who are on SSI, I've alluded to this more times than I care to admit, they have to reapply on their 18th birthday. That's called age 18 redetermination. We're going to talk about it here in a few more slides in more detail, but they're going to get a letter from Social Security somewhere in their 18th year. It doesn't have to happen before their 18th birthday, but somewhere in their 18th year, they're going to get a letter and it says, you may no longer be eligible for benefits, you need to come in and reapply. Here's where your role is, guys, okay? Because parents are going to say, I don't need to do anything. They've been on benefits since they were 4. This is where you come in and say, hey, there's 2 different disability levels and they have to be found eligible as an adult because that whole definition is different. And if they don't bring it up, it's really good during their ARD or some meeting when that child is turning 18 to say, hey, you're going to get a letter from Social Security. Please don't ignore it. It's a whole new application process. And parents won't believe you, but just tell them to call their counselor or their advisor at Social Security and ask for the age 18 redetermination, and they will say yes, because they've probably already gotten a letter or a letter will be forthcoming. This is just an information slide. This is just to offer to the parents on how they can apply for benefits. From when I've started, Social Security has made applying for benefits pretty easy. My husband just turned 65 and he applied for his Medicare Part A very fast. So again, beating a dead horse, the reason I keep bringing up age 18 redetermination is because they're in your surroundings and parents don't know this. So it's good that you have this knowledge. And I've pretty much said it all, but on that somewhere in the 18th year, they have to reapply. It's not just checking in. It's a whole new application. And it's extremely important that they follow through, because if they ignore the letter, somewhere in that 18th year, after Social Security has made attempts to reach them, they have to, by law, terminate them because they're not eligible as an adult because they didn't go through the adult process. And there are parents who absolutely need that money and who especially need that Medicaid. So if you could see me now, I would want to be on my hands and knees, kind of with my hands in prayer, saying, don't drop this. If you can't remember anything else, this is so important that we get this done. Okay, and again, this only applies to SSI because it's needs-based, so it has 2 different definitions. It's not going to apply to the group that we're talking about on Thursday. So this is for your SSI recipients. Now, I don't know, this is hard doing virtual because I'm hoping that you guys are connected with your vocational rehab in your area, especially as the students are really hitting that transitional age, okay? Because here's why it's important. There's something called Section 301. Remember in the beginning when I said there's different levels of disability and some are medical improvement expected and some are medical improvement not expected? If you have some that are medical improvement expected, it's good to especially get them connected with VR, because what this says is when they go through what's called the medical review, that's how many years they're going to check to see if the disability's improved. And if they find them to be medically terminated, it has nothing to do with wages, but they're medically terminated, they will be able to continue their benefits as long as they're already connected with a VR. Now, for your students who are in special education, as you see here, an IEP is what they need to have, okay? The other good news for students who are still in school is youth under the age of 2 who have, age of 22, who go through this medical review and are found to be no longer disabled. They will continue their check and their Medicaid until the IEP stops. So it's good to get your guys SSI Title II, doesn't matter, connected with VR in case there's a medical review where they're found no longer disabled. This is the way to go. Again, if they're found to not be eligible under age 18 redetermination, let's say mom and dad do the application, but they're found to be no longer disabled, they're going to lose their check in their Medicaid. But if they're connected with VR and they have an IEP or VR has a plan written for them, they are allowed to keep their check and Medicaid until they finish the plan. Just a funny story about Section 301 before I go on, because it kind of hits home. So there was a lady who had a common law husband who was very abusive. And one night he shot her and it kind of ricocheted through her temple into her arm, and she had a disability, not to mention post-traumatic stress. Well, she was on a Title II, and I know we're not talking about it yet, but this is a good analogy for how Section 301 works so well. Well, I knew that when she went to be determined if she had a disability or not, she was found to have a disability, but medical improvement expected. So I knew within 0 to 3 years, she was going to be redetermined to see if she still had a disability. Well, this young lady also had 5 kids by this man. So they were getting a check off of her check. So there were 6 checks coming in. And this lady was her post-traumatic stress was ridiculous, not to mention her physical wounds. Long story short, I opened her up with VR to go to school to be a nurse. So her plan before she would be terminated from Social Security was she would get to go through the pathway of being a nurse. Because Section 301 says if there's a plan in place, even if it takes 4 or 5 years to be a nurse, that she will continue, so will her kids continue to receive their checks, and she'll receive her Medicaid. So that's where Section 301 plays such an important role. If you have a family living in poverty, the child has a disability, and maybe the school gave them a disability of dyslexia and learning disabilities. Well, those aren't disabilities necessarily recognized by Social Security unless they drastically impact their ability to go to work, that when they go to apply at age 18, they might not be found to be disabled. Even with the IEP will save them, but once they graduate high school, they would be terminated. But it would still give that family time to have a check and to have their Medicaid. So before I go into the work incentives, we're going to spend the last little bit of our time together talking about the work incentives. So are there any questions?
Yes, ma'am. There are some questions. That's quite a few questions now.
Okay, well, we'll try to get as many of them as we can.
Let's see how many we can get to.
Okay.
All right. Well, I have a student that turns 19 years old in September. His mom stated he was denied Medicaid because his father made too much money. Mm-hmm. And then that's the end of that. So I'm not sure.
So what she needs to do is, and she could have done it last year, is because he's over the age of 19, he can now go apply. So go to how to apply slide that we went through earlier, and let them know that because he's 18, he does not have to live under what the parents have and own, that they now look at what he has and what his resources are, which are nothing probably, or limited. But we also have to look at that fair share when he's approved. But he should be found to have a disability as long as it's, as I just said, learning disabilities, dyslexia, some of those ADHD may not qualify them, to be found disabled under Social Security, even though they're found to have a disability under school. So I can't promise he would be granted Social Security because I don't know what his disability or her disability is, but now's the time to apply because they're no longer looking at the father's income.
Okay. So here's clarity to one of the earlier questions. If a student is over 18 and the parent obtains the guardianship, will the parent's income be considered in deeming?
There is no deeming because they're over the age of 18. So it would be the same scenario that I just said. You would have to look at what their fair share is, and they need to pay their fair share to keep their high check. But there is no parent to child deeming, even with a guardian, because the child's over 18.
Okay. My student applied for the first time after he was 18 years old to SSI and Medicaid. He was denied both. He had no income, but was told by Medicaid his father makes too much money and he can't apply until he is 22 years old.
What?
The parent doesn't know what to do or how to fix the problem. He is nonverbal and his IQ lower than 30, and he is not able to work due to functioning level and self-injurious behaviors.
Okay, the only thing I can think of on why he would be denied is that this father pays very large child support. That's the only thing I can think of. I've never heard of 22 before. I've never heard of 22. If there's any other experts, feel free to chime in. It's always been age 18. At 18, you're an adult. I mean, I'm not going to do anything about it, but I've trained a lot around the state. What city is this in, or what county is this in?
I'll wait for the person to respond.
Yeah, and if you could wait, we'll go on to the next question and then we'll come back to that.
Okay.
Yeah, I have no answer for that because it makes no sense.
Okay. Does the 18-year-old have to provide or maintain proof that they are paying for food and shelter to SSI in order to receive the full amount of SSI?
That's a great question. That's a great question. And I usually do clarify that. So thank you for whoever answered that question. Social Security does what they call an annual redetermination. They kind of do the bookkeeping, where you're living, what you're earning, what you're paying for, okay? And then they take that number, what they do at their annual redetermination, and they carry that through for a year. So if you're not working in January and you're paying your fair share from SSI, your check is going to stay the same all 12 of those months because that's what they're basing it on. You don't have to show receipts every month, but you have to have receipts every month. Okay? But if that child gets a job, then everything changes and that has to be reported to SSI. But once the fair share is determined, and that's usually done annually during this meeting, unless something changes, they just take that number. So it's not like they have to run in every month and show receipts, although it's good to have an accordion folder or something where you're keeping those receipts for the next annual redetermination. Okay?
Okay. So we have students that are on SSI up to age 18 and then reapply and are denied. Why would they be denied?
As I mentioned earlier, it could be what the school has written down as their disability. Again, learning disability, dyslexia, ADHD, some of those qualify for special education within the school, but they don't meet the criteria for Social Security's definition of disability. That's the only thing I can think of, unless they have a fabulous job and they're earning too much money. I don't mean to make light because, you know, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know why people aren't keeping it after the age of 18, especially if they're not working. The only thing I can think of is the adult definition is really about work and not how maybe the ADHD or learning disability, dyslexia, whatever impacts their daily life. Now they want to know, well, given the fact that you have ADHD and dyslexia, can you work? And that answer is yes, they can. And so Social Security would probably deny them based on that.
Okay.
If they're severely, if they have a severe disability, like the one that we're waiting for the answer on, yeah, I've got no clue for that. So I've got no clue for that.
Okay.
Okay.
Another question. Is there a max dollar amount that can be in a special needs trust that is third-party funded before it disqualifies them?
No, because when you do a special needs trust, there can be as much money in there, you know, as you want to put in. It just cannot be for food and shelter, because the SSI is for food and shelter. So you can pay for them to go to, you know, a trade school, a school, you know, you can, I mean, you can take them to Disneyland if it was open. I guess it's open. I mean, you can take them on vacation every year. You just can't do food and shelter with it.
Mm-hmm.
You can pay their credit card. You can, you know, you can buy them a car. It's just it's all about the food and shelter. And to be honest with you, I don't play a special needs trust even on TV. I don't know enough about it. I know enough to be dangerous. I just know that the special needs trust is set up in a way that Social Security does not count it, because it has nothing to do with food and shelter or resources. So they have a way around it. I don't know, because I've never set one up. So it's just full disclosure.
Okay, so Sandy, I have some more questions that we can continue on, and then about 5 minutes take a break. Would you like that?
Let's do that. This is a good place to stop. So let's do 2 or 3 more questions depending on how long they take me.
Okay, here's the other question. Based on the earlier question, does child support for an 18-year-old still attending school impact the student's SSI check?
Yes, and you're going to see that after break, because I'm going to show you where they count that SSI check when they're making that calculation. So first of all, let me clarify that they don't count the full check. And again, for simple math, don't be offended by the number I'm going to say. I just don't like doing math off the top of my head. But let's say the monthly child support is $300. They're only going to count 2/3 of it. So they're going to count $200 of the $300. But I'm going to show you after break where that goes on the calculation sheet so that you will be able to see that clearly.
Okay. Let's see, where are you? Can a student with an emotional disturbance along with learning disability apply for the SSI?
You guys are wanting me to be Social Security. The answer is sure, they can apply. Again, it's all about the severity on how it stops them from earning money. The definition for adult is all centered around, yes, you have a disability, but can you work with the disability? So as far as the emotional goes, it depends on exactly what the emotional is. But I would always, and I always tell parents, please apply. The worst they're going to tell you is no. And if you feel like you weren't represented fairly or you didn't give enough information, you can always appeal the decision. But I can't guarantee, you know, there's no, when it comes to Social Security, you notice I don't work for Social Security, even though I know stuff, because, yeah, like that answer about the young man who didn't get it, I can never guess what Social Security is going to do. I just know their rules. So, but I would definitely apply. Okay, let's take 2 more and then we'll take it.
So if they are denied, how many times can they reapply? Have the 3rd time applying work?
Well, it's not the 3rd time applying. You know, you only want to reapply, you know, that would maybe be time has passed. Now they're 18, so I'm reapplying. What you want to do is you want to appeal it. And there's different levels of appealing any decision that Social Security makes. The first one is a desk review. That means, you know, if I had Jane sitting next to me, I'm reviewing Jane's work. So that one's usually not good, you know, and then it works its way up through a law judge. And, you know, once you get to a judge and they can hear the story, that's usually, if it's going to be turned over, it will. But parents need to recognize that Social Security's definition of disability isn't about how severe the disability is when they're an adult over the age of 18. It's all about, given this disability, are they able to work? So It's not necessarily about the severity, but they have a pretty strict guideline. And they have this thing called a blue book that kind of lists the different disabilities on how they categorize them in the area of importance on determining disability. But I always say apply and appeal. You know, it's not going to hurt, because appealing goes up eventually to a judge. It's just a matter of how much time and effort do you want to put in it, because it's not always easy. I'm not saying it's easy. Okay, let's do one more and then we'll take a 5-minute.
Is the annual determination at the beginning of every year or at a particular time of the year? And can it be reviewed before the next?
Well, yeah, they have too many people to just do it often. Sometimes their annual review isn't really annual, but they couldn't do them all in January. That would be impossible, because there's millions and millions and millions of people on SSI. So the annual determination is set. I don't really know the answer on when it is. I just know it's coming, and then it's set at that amount for the remainder of whatever the next annual redetermination is. And I don't know if you know this or not, but Social Security is pretty much behind on everything, and they are behind on their annual reviews. And they have actually started prioritizing them by doing annual reviews first on those people that they know are working. So they're trying to stay on top of those to avoid overpayments, because there's just too many Americans on SSI. They can't keep up. It's not that they're not doing their job, it's just they have an impossible job to do.
Okay, so why don't we go ahead and take a 5-minute break and let everybody stretch, and then we can all be back at, let's say, 1:55.
Yeah, let's start at 1:55. That's a little less than 5 minutes, but I need a good 30 minutes to get through the remaining. So
okay, so okay. 1:55, 1:56, something like.
Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, all right.
All right, 5-minute break.
For those of you who heard me whispering, my grandson just came in, so I apologize.
We have 1 minute left and then we'll get back to the training. Okay, Sandy, it's 1:56. Are you ready?
Okay, I am ready. And I wanted to let you know before I start, I did look up the stimulus check and it does not affect the SSI check and it does not count as resources for 12 months. But because it's under $2,000, you should be fine unless you had other money in the bank. So, but you don't have to report it on taxes or to Social Security if they received a stimulus check. So that was all I was able to look up. So, all right. So far we haven't even talked about work. You're like, oh, why did I even sign up for this stuff? Well, because turning 18 is important. Understanding why people might get denied and when to apply, all of that's important because this is a needs-based benefit. And if you have some knowledge to share to parents to make their journey easier, I think it's important that you guys understand some of this stuff too, so that you can help them, especially around that age 18 redetermination. But we're going to spend the rest of our time looking at that calculation sheet, and the person who asked about child support, we're going to get into that pretty quick. So, but these are the areas we're going to cover. I'm not going to read it to you. This is just a list of what we're going to go through. Some of it we already went through, such as section 301. I'm not going to go over that again. Here's the important thing. If your students get a job and they're on SSI, or you help students find jobs, okay, and they start to receive a paycheck, it is critical. Okay, if you learn nothing else, please understand this slide. Retrospective monthly accounting, you don't need to know the term, but what you do need to know is Social Security does everything 2 months later. Okay, so let's say I start working and getting a paycheck in January. Okay, I go to work, I get paid in January. I have to report my wages to Social Security by February 6th, all of my January earnings, and my SSI check will change in March. So although I'm working in January, it will not reflect in my SSI check for 2 months, in this scenario, March. So I am getting my check in January and February, and I'm still getting my full SSI check. That's not an overpayment. This is so critical that we get this, because parents are already going to balk at you getting them a job. And then they see that they're getting a check and still their full SSI check, they're freaking out. All they can see is overpayment. So you need to be able to share with them, yes, Sandy's going to work in January. We're going to report her wages by the 6th of February, and her January wages will affect her March SSI check for the first time. There's a 2-month delay. So January and February is kind of a windfall, because now not only do I get my full SSI check, I get my work check too. So woo, it's a gravy train. Well, if you're thinking this through, let's say I lose my job in January. So in January, even though I'm not working, I'm still getting counted for the wages I did in November. So I'm not going to get my full SSI check back until March because of the 2-month delay. So once families understand that they don't have an overpayment when they start working, and they're like, oh, hallelujah, look at all this extra money, they also need to understand, especially if this child, it's their first job or they don't have a good history of keeping jobs, that there's also going to be a 2-month delay on getting the SSI check back if they stop working. Now, I never stop after one slide, but this is how important it is. I want you to get it. Are there any questions about what I just said? Vanessa, I'm going to take that to be a no.
There is a question.
Okay.
There's a student earned income exclusion for all SSI recipients, regardless of disability. I guess that's the question. Is there?
There's a income? Yeah, I'm getting to that. There is a student earned income exclusion for people on SSI, not for all people with disabilities, unless your school has a program.
Okay.
For Social Security, it's only those who are on SSI.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to assume that everybody understands the 2-month delay in decreasing the check when someone goes to work, and the 2-month delay increasing the check back up once they stop working. It's critical that families know that, excuse me, because we're already convincing the family that it's okay for Sandy to go to work. Then they see their check not going down, they're wondering what's up. And then when Sandy stops working and the check doesn't go immediately back up, they're not going to trust you to get Sandy another job. So if you understand no other slide but this one, you're ahead of the game, because this is an important slide. So there's a 2-month delay. Okay, so what does this dance look like? You know, we call it the 4-step, but then I had to go and add a 5th step because I don't want to be beat up by any parents. But this is kind of what the calculation sheet looks like, okay? There's step 1, step 2, step 3, and step 4. Step 1 is where we look at their unearned income. Unearned income is any check that you get that's not wages or self-employment, but we're not going to self-employment. But like if you receive child support, that child support would go here when determining how much money an SSI check would be, okay? Step 2 only talks about their earnings. Step 3 takes the 2 totals of step 1 and step 2, and that's what we call countable income. And that amount is subtracted in step 4 from the highest that that person is eligible for. So let's look at this. So let's say 125, for the sake of argument, is 2/3 of the child support that a student on SSI receives, okay? Students not working, they're on SSI, but they get child support. Social Security counts 2/3, okay? So we'll say that that's $125. The first thing Social Security does is they deduct $20 from that. So of the $125, they're only counting $105. There's nothing to do in step 2. There's really nothing to do in step 3, because in step 2 he's not working. In step 3 there's nothing to add together. So you carry that 105 over to step 4, and this child, you know, is found to be eligible for the full amount that you can get in 2020 of $783. You subtract the countable unearned income in step 1 of $105. So this student would have a revised SSI check of $678. Now, I used to be a job coach too at the Betty Hardwick Center in Abilene, Texas. And I'm here to tell you, when that check starts going down, they're ready to quit. So I created step 5. Step 5 takes the gross income, in this case it's the child support, and again there's another 1/3 I could add on to that, and the $687 of SSI. So I can say, you know, do you want $783 or do you want $803.50? This is more of their usable income. And in this case, because I said it's child support, it would even be a 1/3 higher than that of the 125. Now we're going to look at an example of somebody who doesn't have any unearned income, but they go and get a job. And this is primarily going to be your case, okay? Sandy is your student. She's on SSI. Your job is to get her a job. The parents have said yes. You get her a job and she earns $350. And the parent wants to know what is going to happen to my SSI. Well, you'll notice the first thing we do is we subtract $20 again. You see the $20 is on step 1 and step 2. That's called general income exclusion. And if you don't use it in step 1, you can use it in step 2. But you're going to see on the next slide that if I use it in step 1, I can't use it in step 2. So the first thing I do with the gross earned income, meaning before taxes, is subtract 20. And then I subtract something called the earned income exclusion of $65. That's earned income, so it has to stay on step 2. So far I've minused 20, I've minused 65 to have a remainder of $265 that they're counting so far, but then Social Security divides that amount by 2. So of the $350, Social Security is only counting $132.50 when determining what your SSI check amount will be revised to. So there is nothing really happening in step 3, so we're just going to carry the total countable earned income this time and subtract that from the 783. And so now the SSI check is revised to $650.50. Again, at this point, the person is ready to quit because it's no longer 783. So you kind of want to do step 5, where you take the gross income of $350, the revised SSI check of $650.50, add it together and say, would you rather have $783 or $1,000.50? Now again, this is gross income, so taxes will come out, but it's going to be higher than $783. I hope this is making sense to you. Because the formula stays the same, it's just where you plug in the numbers. So let's look at one now where you do have a student who has child support, okay? Again, 2/3 of that child support goes on step 1 as unearned income. And now you get them a job where they're earning $463. So now we're going to really utilize this calculation sheet. So we start with step 1. Again, we minus 20 from the 2/3 of the child support, and so they're going to count $205 of it. They're going to take the gross before taxes earnings for the month of $463, and they're not going to subtract 20 this time because we used it above, but they are going to subtract 65, and they're still going to divide by 2. So of the $463 in gross monthly earnings, Social Security is only going to count $199 of that. Now, because we have 2 calculations, the unearned and the earned in step 1 and 2, we need to go to step 3 and add those countable totals together. So we bring the $205 over from step 1. We bring the $199 over from step 2 and add them together. So their total countable income of the 2 checks that Social Security will count is $404. Again, they subtract that from the 783. That's not new. So now their revised check is $379. And you can bet your bippy they're ready to quit because that's a big chunk, and they're worried about their Medicaid. You haven't heard me yet say their Medicaids went away because it hasn't. And remember, in Texas, it's automatic. They're on SSI, they have Medicaid. None of this work has affected their Medicaid, but we still need to do step 5 so they don't quit. So their unearned income is $225 plus the third, since in this example, we're counting it as child support, plus the $463 in monthly earnings, gross earnings, and the revised SSI check of $379. Well, that's $1,067 plus. because we didn't count all the child support. Would you rather have 1,067 or 783? So step 5 is critical in them keeping their job. So this is a pretty, I'm going to go back to it. This is a pretty common, simple add and subtract and 1 divide. The math isn't hard. Please use a calculator so you don't get it wrong. I'm going to introduce you Thursday to the WIPA project. They will do it. But this, I just wanted to give you a visual on how Social Security looks at how they count earnings and any unearned income they have coming in to determine how they revise their SSI check. So Vanessa, I'm going to stop here and see if there's any questions just on the calculation. I'm not ready to go ahead on anything I haven't discussed yet.
I don't see any on the calculations right now.
Yeah, there's usually not too many on the calculations because it is pretty standard practice. So now you'll see there's things here like SEIE, IRWE, BWE, PASS. What? She didn't even talk about those. Well, we're getting ready to spend the rest of our time talking about those work incentives. And what work incentives do is they allow that student or that person on SSI to go to work and not have all of their earnings counted. Okay? So let's look at the first one, and this is the one of everything I'm going to talk about for the rest of the time. This is the one that you guys need to know about, and somebody actually asked about it in a question already. So with a student earned income exclusion, this is an SSI only work incentive. So you have to be on SSI. You have to be the age of 22. You have to be under the age of 22. When you turn 22, it's over. There's no negotiating longer. And you have to be regularly attending school. Now, if I was doing a full day training, I have about 8 slides that define regularly attending school. But pretty much anybody who's homeschooled, virtual learning, face-to-face learning, in a regular school system, in a private school, maybe a technical school, college, as long as you're attending a certain number of hours, you're considered regularly attending. If you want to be a nerd like me, you can always Google student earned income exclusion regularly attending school, and about an 8-page document will pop up and it'll tell you all the nuts and bolts about it. Now, Social Security is really focusing on SSI and not having generational beneficiaries. Grandma had it, mom had it, I have it, my kids have it. They're trying to break the cycle, and they understand that education is the way to do that. The more education someone has, the higher earning capacity they also have. So they have the student earned income exclusion, and what it says is in 2020, Social Security will not count up to the first $1,900 of earned income each month. $1,900. Student goes to work, they're not even going to consider doing the -20, -65 divide by 2 if it's up to $1,900. That's very generous for a student. Now, Social Security is also wise. Yes, I said Social Security is wise. I don't say it often. I have a lot of respect for them. But when they created this work incentive, they were very brilliant to say, yes, we will not count up to $1,900 per month, but we're going to put a calendar year cap on it. From January 1st to December 31st, we will not exclude more than a total of $7,670 a year. Okay? So yes, they will take up to $1,900 a month, but once I hit that calendar year cap, which usually is a little over 4 months, I don't have student earned income exclusion again until the following January if I'm under 22 and still attending school. So this is generous, but you have to use it very smartly. Oh, my things moved, so I apologize. I thought I had all my numbers lined up. So let's look at a case here, okay? So, and I'm not going to keep saying child support 2/3. You guys know that. So to save some words. So on step 1, this student has countable unearned income child support of $200. And he gets a job and he earns $1,900 a month. And he's freaking out because he wants to know what's going to happen to his check, because he doesn't really think Social Security is going to exclude $1,900. So that's the first example I'm going to give you. We're going to do the same thing we've done already. Because we have income in step 1, we have to use the -20 there to have countable unearned money of $180. In step 2, the gross before taxes is $1,900. Well, student earned income exclusion zeroes it out, because they're going to exclude all of it, because it's, you know, it's up to $1,900, and it's $1,900. So it's 0 down the board. There's no need to -65. There's no need to divide by 2. There is no countable unearned income. Okay. So on step 3, we really don't need to do it, because we only have countable unearned income of the $180 from step 1. So we're going to subtract just that from the $783 in step 4 to have a revised SSI check of $603. There's 2 more steps now. There's step 5 and there's step 6 when it comes to student earned income exclusion. On step 5, we're going to do just what we've done before. Add up all the checks. 200 unearned, 1,900 earned, revised SSI check is $603. This student now has $2,703. And yes, that says danger with an exclamation mark underlined in bold, because they're over the $2,000 resource limit. Okay, not only that, there's a step 6. Remember, there's a calendar year cap from January 1st to December 31st of $7,670. So I have to start tracking how much of that calendar year cap is left. So $7,670 minus $1,900. Already after the first month, there's only $5,770 left. And to do the full calculations, like I said, it will last 4 full months with $70 left of the student earned income exclusion for the 5th month. So this working at $1,900 doesn't work well unless the student is doing it in the summer, you know, working weekends, summers, vacations, and they're not working 12 months. You know, maybe they're only working 4 months of the year. Maybe they're just working this summer. Then the $1,900 is great. But if a student has a job that's a calendar year long, $1,900 isn't going to be very much, because after the 5th year, there is no more student earned income exclusion. And even in the 5th year, rather than deducting $1,900, we only have $70 left of that calendar year cap to deduct. I'm going to show you one more slide, and then I'm going to take questions. So Vanessa, if you want to be ready. So here's a different scenario, and one that makes more sense to me for students who want to work year around, okay? Let's say the student, again, has the child support, $200 minus 20, nothing's new there. We know the countable unearned income is $180. But this time the student goes to work and their monthly gross income is $639.16. Again, the student earned income exclusion is going to deduct all of it because it's under $1,900. Again, there's nothing to do in step 3 really, because we're just bringing over the step 1 total. We're going to subtract that just like we have been from the $783 to come up with a revised check of $603. We're still going to do step 5. We're going to add the 200. We're going to add the $639.16 of earned income. We're going to add the revised SSI check of $603 to come up with $1,442.16. I still have the danger sign only because it's close to 2,000. It's just the danger sign is to remind them, pay attention, you might be over resources. And when you're over resources, you not only don't get an SSI check, you don't get your Medicaid. Nobody wants that. And remember, we still have to do step 6, looking at that calendar year cap. And the reason I use $639.16, because if you multiply that by 12 months, it comes up to $7,669.92. You are 8 cents under the calendar year cap. So this person would never lose their ability to use the student earned income exclusion on the calculation sheet for the whole calendar year. And you will see here on step 2, the student earned income exclusion comes right after the gross monthly earnings. So it's before the -20, -65 divide by 2. So they take it right off the top. So oftentimes with students, you don't have to finish the calculation because it just zeroes out. With that, I think that's the last slide on student earned income exclusion. So Vanessa, are there any questions? Because this is the one I want you guys using.
So far, Sandy, I don't see any questions regarding the student earned income exclusion.
Okay, so one of the things I didn't say, because I just remembered, because I'm getting older every year, is to get a student earned income exclusion, usually the question is, how do I get it? And usually at this point, I've already addressed it, I just forgot. So all you have to do, or all the student or family has to do, is say, hi, I'm Sandy. You know, I'm a freshman at, you know, Stephenville High School, and I just got a job at McDonald's. And I'm going to be earning $600 a month, and I would like the student earned income exclusion. The only thing that the school needs to know is, 1, I'm under the age of 22. 2, verification from the school that I am an active student. And 3, report my wages, and the student earned income exclusion is automatically put into the computer. Now, hopefully I'm salaried at $639.16, because if that's the case, I know what's going to happen all 12 months. But if I work at McDonald's and some days some weeks I work 10 hours a week, and some weeks I work 40 hours a week, then this number could be squishy squashy as far as the monthly gross earned income. And by the way, squishy squashy is not a Social Security term. So when the income isn't the same every month, you want to keep your eye on that calendar year cap. Because when that calendar year cap, you want to be able to proactively prepare the student that this benefit is about to stop. Okay? Are there still any questions before I proceed? Because it's this important.
Yes, here's a question. Can students over age 18 automatically receive Medicaid without SSI?
Oh, yes, but I don't have time. I'm already going to go over. Yes, they can, because there's different waiver programs. There's about 1,600 ways to get Medicaid in Texas, but I don't have time. And I just looked at the clock, so I apologize. So the answer is yes, but I don't have time to share. If you want to do an email, I can send you some information on what some of the other Medicaids are.
Okay.
I'm going to continue on, and I'm probably not going to stop until the end because I want to get through these, and then we'll just take questions till and people can sign off if they don't want to hear the questions.
Okay.
So impairment-related work expense is exactly what it says. It's an impairment-related work expense that you pay for, that mom and dad, VR, school, nobody reimburses you for, okay? But it has to be related to your disability and nobody else reimburses you for. Now, if you have a large bill, you know, let's say it has something to do with a wheelchair or something, and the bill is like $1,200, you can prorate that over 12 months if it's a large expense. And then, you know, they'll just take $120 out, or whatever 12 is, $100 out for the next 12 months. But here's the calculation, and this is going to go easy. Even if you still see there's quite a few slides here, this goes easy because we know the calculation. I'm not going to go through the calculation with you, except to show you where the IRWI is taken. It's the same formula. It's just that before you divide by 2, you subtract the IRWI amount. And in this case, it's $100. And then when you're doing step 5, you have to remember, when you're looking at usable income, you've told Social Security you have $100 in out-of-pocket expenses. Impairment-related work expense related to your impairment that you pay for. You just have to write a simple letter to Social Security. I'm working at McDonald's, and here are some expenses I have that are strictly related to my disability. And then Social Security will either say yes or no, or they'll negotiate with you. Blind work expense. Well, it's like, oh, we just had impairment related work expense. Now, why do we have this blind work expense? Because the blind people who have blindness had the best advocacy group when they put together these work incentives. So again, you have to have an expense, okay, that you need to do to go to work. And you have a disability of statutory blindness. However, for people who have this disability, it doesn't have to be related to that blindness. So I'm not going to read these to you, but I'm just going to point out some. So what expenses do I have out of pocket so I can go to work? Well, Social Security taxes are taken out, so those can be deducted as a blind work expense. Money for me to eat at work because I work over the lunch hour can be taken out. So you'll see it's a far more vast. It can be related to your disability, but it doesn't have to be related to your disability. Federal, state, and local income tax, that can be deducted each month. What's taken out of my check, I can get back as blind work expense. Now with blind work expense, remember they had great advocacy. So you'll see here, blind work expense comes before the divide by 2. If you have an IRWI, because it comes before the divide by 2, you're only getting credit for half of that 100. So you'd really get credit for like $50 because it comes before the divide by 2. Blind work expense comes after the divide by 2. So you get dollar for dollar credit. So in this case, this woman has $600, or man has $600 of gross monthly earnings. Social Security is only going to count $17.50 with the minus 20, minus 65, divide by 2, minus the blind work expense. And again, in step 2 or step 6, I'm sorry, let's try again. In step 5, I'm going to take a deep breath and not rush. In step 5, you want to remember when you're doing usable income to subtract the blind work expense. Okay, so those are 2, and then I'm going to talk about PASS, and then I really want to get to Medicaid, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on PASS because PASS can take the whole day. PASS simply says, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's not about Sandy's working at McDonald's, but where does Sandy work? If you have income other than SSI, you can set it aside in a PASS plan. It's an actual document. It's about 24 pages long that talks about what is your goal? What's it going to take for you to get there? When do you think you'll be done? What money do you have to set aside? What expenses will you have? And the form number is 545. You just Google SSA form 545 and this will tell you. So let's say I want to become a nurse. So my goal is to become a nurse. Well, what are the steps to become a nurse? There's education involved. There's probably some practicum involved. And how long it will take needs to be defined. And how much money am I setting aside of my work to become a nurse? I cannot set aside my SSI in a PASS because it is for food and shelter. They're pretty serious about that. Now you will notice PASS is the only SSI work incentive that comes after you've looked at the earned income, because what they want to do is when you total the sum of step 1 and the sum of step 2, you come up with your total that would normally be deducted from the 783. But here we're going to say we're going to set aside that whole $416.50. So then there's no countable income. So I get my full 783 because I'm committing this to setting aside for my PASS. So here, same thing on step 5, you're going to add up the usual suspects. But when you get your total, you have to remember you are committing to setting aside $416.50 each month in a separate PASS account, or buying approved expenses or paying for approved expenses that total $416.50 every month. A PASS is a wonderful, wonderful dream maker. It really helps people attain goals. We've had some wonderful success with it on helping people find a career, not a job. But I know you guys want to hear about Medicaid. So Medicaid, like I said, Medicaid is automatic for people who get SSI in Texas. Here's what you don't know, and here's what I want you to remember. When you do that calculation sheet and it says you have no SSI, okay? Your countable income is larger than 783. If it's due to work, if I went to work and I took my SSI calculation sheet to where I am not eligible for an SSI check, I am not terminated from SSI, and I will not lose my Medicaid, because there is a law called 1619B that says if I go to work, and because of that work, I go to a 0 SSI check, I get to keep my check and my Medicaid for free until I hit the state threshold, which this year is $35,973 of countable income. There's other resources, because at that point they say you can afford your own insurance, which is crazy. But the secret is parents need to know that even if Sandy goes to a 0 SSI check because of work, I'm still allowed to keep my check and my Medicaid for free, or it'll keep my Medicaid for free until I hit that state threshold. And the secret is if I lose my job, even if I quit, it keeps my eligibility to go right back on a cash benefit. So 1619B is important, and we can, those of you who want to stay online maybe longer and talk about it, it's important, because you're going to get pushback from a lot of parents who say, I don't want my child to go to work. They need their Medicaid. Well, this is saying if they go to work and they lose their SSI check, they get to keep their Medicaid. And it keeps them eligible to go back on a cash payment should something happen to their job. They get reduced hours, they get, they stop working, they get to keep it. They get to keep their Medicaid. And then individual threshold just simply says I'm a high Medicaid user and I need a higher threshold than the $35,000+ that's in Texas. We have a lady in Lubbock who has an individual threshold for 1619B, and it's right around $98,000, because that's what she would need to replace the amount of Medicaid that she needs to survive and to work. Why do they do 1619B? Because if people lose their Medicaid due to working, they're going to stop working and they're just going to go back on the rolls. So this is a way of keeping taxpayers, but they also get to keep their Medicaid. With that, I'm going to stop. I'm sorry I went 3 minutes over. Those of you who have questions who want to stick around, I'm happy to stick around and answer. I guess I got too long-winded on stories.
Okay.
And those of you who want to go, I'll see you Thursday.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining today. I guess we'll just pick up on Thursday at 1 o'clock again with the continuation of work incentives. But thank you so much, and we appreciate you spending this time with us.
Okay. And then did you want to go through some questions, Vanessa, or did you just want to have them email me?
So I have one.
Oh, okay. Well, let's answer that one. Hope she
so
stays
is there a limit on the impairment-related work expense?
No. No, as long as it's related to their disability, there's not a threshold number that you can claim.
And that's the only one I had on this section.
Okay. All right. Sorry I went long. I guess it was a 5-minute break through me. So.
Well, thank you everyone so much for coming, and we will see you on Thursday.
All right. You guys have a good day. See you Thursday.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye, Vanessa.
Bye, Sandy.
I am 59 and I'm not going to work much longer before I retire. And so there's a very real possibility that if I had children under the age of 18, they could get a check. So, one of your questions might be, are you retiring, or are you retiring soon? That could be an important question. So don't always assume just because you have a student who's on a disability that they're receiving SSI, okay? So now we're going to leave that auxiliary benefit, that dependence benefit that has nothing to do with disability. It's all about the parent. Something happened to the parent, disabled, retired, or deceased. Okay, now we're going to spend the remainder of our time looking at the Social Security disability benefits under Title II. And again, we're not going to look at widow or widowers because we are talking about transition age youth. So we're going to spend the remainder of our time talking about Social Security disability insurance and childhood disability beneficiaries and what those different nuances are. It's not enough to know they're on a Title II benefit, because how a child's benefit is looked at, that we just looked at, and how these two programs are looked at are different. So we have to know. That's why at the end of today, I am going to give you the resources to reach out to experts who can absolutely help you with this at no cost. So yesterday when we were talking about SSI and you automatically get Medicaid, well, you also automatically get a check. With Title II, it's more like an insurance type of program. Usually once you're found to have a disability, there's a 5-month waiting period before you get the cash check. In addition to that, there's an additional 24-month waiting period before you get Medicare, which is the insurance attached to Title II. So you don't get Medicaid in Title II under normal circumstances. Under Title II, you get Medicare, but it's after a 24-month waiting period in most cases. And I'm going to talk about those different nuances. The other thing with SSI yesterday, we did that calculation sheet where the amounts were going down as your income from earnings went up. With Title II, it's not that way. With Title II, you get all of your check or you get no check. There's nothing in between. There's not a gradual reduction. So you get all your check or no check. So with Social Security disability insurance, this is the first category we're going to look at. And this is let me back up a minute and say, with Title II, there's always an insured worker. Okay, somebody has paid in enough FICA tax that they are considered an insured worker. If we go back and think about those non-disability programs like retirement, auxiliary benefits, the child's benefits, the dependent, that's because there was an insured worker. When I retire, I'm getting a check. It's an entitlement because I paid in. I'm the insured worker. For that child, the child got a check because the insured worker was either disabled, retired, or deceased. So there's an insured worker in every picture and every category of Title II benefits. So under this disability-related benefit, Social Security disability insurance, the insured person is the person with the disability. This person has went to work and earned enough credits to become entitled based on his own or her own work record. So they don't have to be 18. They're usually 18 or older, but younger people, and these are the folks you're working with, so you need to know this. Remember, yesterday I said I would cue you into when you really need to pay attention. You need to pay attention to this because they don't need as many credits as older people who get on the benefit need. Like I need over 40 credits to become eligible, but I've worked since I was 14, so I've had 40 credits for forever ago because I'm old as Moses. So just remember, with Social Security disability insurance, the person who's insured is your student. They still have a 5-month waiting period, and then they have an additional 24-month waiting period to become eligible for Medicare. Now, let's take a breath from that because I'm going to totally shift your brain. Because now we're going to talk about another check that comes from Social Security under Title II, and that's called a Childhood Disability Beneficiary, a CDB. And you're going to say, but Sandy, you already talked to me about that. And well, no, I didn't. I talked to you about child's benefits. This is when you still have the insured worker who's a parent, who is disabled, retired, and deceased, but this person has to be 18 to get this benefit. The other one can get it at birth. You know, if mom is pregnant with me and my dad passes away shortly after I'm born and he paid in enough credits, he's the insured worker, I could get a check from him till I'm 18, disability or not. But my siblings also get a check. But let's say I'm the sibling left behind that has the disability, where my other siblings who don't have a disability would stop receiving that child's check, not based on disability, but based on my father passing away. What childhood disability beneficiaries benefit does is it allows me to continue when I turn 18, to continue to get a check to where my siblings would not, because they don't have a disability. I have to have had a disability before I turned 22, and I have to be unmarried. Now, I'm going to come back to that because there's some comedy behind that, okay? Now, I'm not saying you have to be on child's benefits first. You can have somebody on SSI who's 20, 30, 40 years old, 50 years old, and dad retires. They're going to be thrown onto childhood disability benefits, the CDB, because this is an entitlement program. Remember, somebody's paid into it with their FICA tax, and SSI is a needs-based program, what we talked about Tuesday. They're always the payer of last resort. So if somebody else can pay, they have to take it. So a person might be on SSI all their life going about it smoothly, but dad retires, becomes disabled, or passes away, and suddenly I'm getting a check from a letter from Social Security saying, congratulations, you're now eligible for childhood disability benefits. Okay? So it doesn't have to happen, but if you have a child who's currently getting that child's benefit, not related to disability, and they're about to turn 18, you need to know this so that you can help the parents understand that they're going to get a letter when they turn 18. So 2 things I've said so far that are important. 1, you need to know that when your students go to work and they're paying in FICA, they can become eligible for their own Title II check under that SSDI, the one we just talked about. Or if you have a child who's on that child's benefit, that has nothing to do with disability, and they're turning 18, you need to let them know that they will most likely transition to the CDB. The other difference is there's no 5-month waiting period to get the check, but there is still the 24-month waiting period to be eligible for the Medicare. I'm going to stop after 2 slides if you want to start typing your questions. So this is important, especially if you help people get jobs in the community, or you're part of the IEP process to where you're talking about employment, because parents need to know this. I said that they need fewer credits when they're young to become eligible for SSDI, the Social Security Disability Insurance, the Title II, even if they're on SSI. A youth under the age of 24 only needs 6 credits. So how do I get a credit? So a qualifying credit in 2020 is $1,410. So when your student grosses $1,410 in 1 check or 10 checks, it doesn't matter, when they get a cumulative total in 2020 of $1,410, they've gotten 1 credit. Okay? And every time in 2020 that they get another $1,410, they're going to get another credit. Now, there is a limit. You cannot earn more than 4 credits in 1 calendar year. So your student, even though they're earning maybe more than that, they're only going to give a maximum of 4 credits that year. But if you think about it, and your students, I know they're under 24 probably, the next year, after they do it again, whatever the 2021 amount is, whenever they do that again twice, they will have 6 credits. So I always tell transition professionals and parents of transition students that when you go to work with school, it's a good thing. It's never a bad thing. But there's a very real possibility within a year and some months that you might become entitled to Title II. And that's okay, because they haven't paid in enough to have an exorbitant amount of money. I mean, remember with SSI, we said you can never earn more than $783 a month. Well, here it depends on what you paid in. So Bill Gates will get a Title II check when he retires. And his check is going to be far bigger than mine. And mine is going to be bigger than a transition age youth who qualifies. So what happens, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, please do not ask any questions because I only have so much time on what I'm about to say. They become what's called concurrent, meaning they haven't earned enough that when we add their Title II check, their SSDI check, or their CDB check to step 1 on that SSI calculation sheet yesterday, it's not enough that when we do that SSI calculation that we did Tuesday, that they go to 0. They still get a small check. So what am I saying? I'm saying that they're now concurrent. They get a Title II check, they get an SSI check, they get Medicaid, and eventually they'll have Medicare. So it's still a win-win. They still have Medicaid. They're just getting 2 checks, and the SSI check will be smaller because it's counted as unearned income when calculating what happens to the SSI check. Okay? So who gets a Title II check? This is kind of redundant, so I'm going to skip over this. And I'm going to skip over this except for the second paragraph that says, when Social Security determines Sandy has a disability, okay, and I am eligible for SSDI, okay, they can retroactively go back to when my disability started, or 12 months, whichever is less. So if I request SSDI, and they find my date of disability onset was 10 months ago, they'll go back 10 months. If they find out it was 24 months ago, they'll go back 12 months. Okay? And there still will be the 5-month waiting period. So where I want your brains to go today is Tuesday we talked about like a welfare program. It was needs-based. It was our tax dollars paying for everything. It was means tested. You had resource limits. We don't have that. We don't have that here. We don't have resource limits. It's not means tested. It's an entitlement program. We paid into it. However, if you have somebody who's concurrent also on SSI, we need to remember that the amount of that Title II check will count as unearned income when calculating the SSI sheet. You know, yesterday I just stuck with this is 2/3 of the child support because that's what you knew. So what you now know today is when the person is concurrent, their unearned income goes on step 1 of an SSI calculation sheet if they're concurrent. And remember, when they're paying in, they only need 6 credits, which they can do in a year and some months. Okay, I'm going to stop there and see if there's any questions, Vanessa.
Yes, so we have a couple of questions. Well, there's really one question from one person. What if the child does not have any credits? And then what if the child is not able to earn any credits due to severe disability?
Then they will stay on, if they're on SSI, which I'm assuming, which could be dangerous, but if they're on SSI, they'll just remain on SSI. There is no requirement that they go to work to retain SSI. So they'll just be on SSI and with no work credits. But they do have to, and hear me say this, when dad or mom die, mom or dad retires, or mom and dad acquire a disability and go on a Title II check, this child will have to go on that check also. And depending on how much mom or dad paid in, they could take them off of SSI, but they can keep their Medicaid. Don't ask me how, because it's a whole other training. Just get with your WIPA. So it's okay. There's no requirement for work, but remember, it's not about work that's going to put them always on Title II. It's also about what happens to the parent, because there's a program for parents being that insured worker. Okay. Anything else, Miss Vanessa?
Nope. There's a comment.
Uh-oh.
You can get 2 different checks for different reasons.
Yes.
Comment.
Yes, that is true. And you know, if I want to really freak you guys out, you can be a dual concurrent. And just because I think I have time today, because I'm not like ingraining stuff in your head today. I'm just giving you information with fewer things that you must memorize. I'm going to tell you this. So let's say that we have somebody who's on child disability benefits, okay? They're over age 18, something happened to a parent, so they're getting it because they have a disability, because they're an adult, they're over 18, okay? So they're under the disability cash payment, okay? That person goes to work, pays in enough credits, he could get a check. He could get a check for his own work record, his parents' work record, and still not have it be enough to get off of SSI. Now, is that common? No. But I just thought, since somebody was smart enough to know you could get 2 checks, you can actually get 3. So, but that's for a whole other training, and that's more information than you guys working with transition age youth will ever need to know, okay?
So here's a question, Sandy.
Okay. Oh, you guys just want to challenge me now because you're smart.
Is there a 24-month waiting period when a student moves to Title II because of a parent's death or retirement?
Yes, there is a 24-month waiting period, but they don't have to wait the 5 months to get the cash check. And I'm going to say this. See, this is where it's hard taking questions when you get such a smart audience. If the person is working, the child is working that you're referencing, they could do a Medicaid buy-in, but just write that word down and don't ask me any questions, or I'm going to go over again. And just use it for the WIPA when you contact them. Because they can do this buy-in thing if they're working until their Medicare kicks in. Okay, any other questions, Vanessa?
Not yet.
Okay.
Here's one. Wait a minute. What do students do for health insurance for those 24 months?
Medicaid buy-in. Medicaid buy-in, just in a nutshell, Medicaid buy-in allows anybody, not just students, but anybody with a disability who is ineligible for insurance, such as getting their Medicare or their Medicaid for some reason hasn't started. They can do this formula and pay a premium sometimes. But I would say a student, unless they have a large unearned income check from an insured parent who has one of those 3 categories, disabled, retired, or deceased, unless they have a high Title II premium, there isn't much of a premium, because they're very generous with earned income. So, but just think Medicaid buy-in, feel free to Google it and look for yourself. It's really not that complicated of a process. But oftentimes when somebody, for whatever reason, is not entitled to Medicare or regular, what we call regular Medicaid, we can get Medicaid through the Medicaid buy-in if they're working. And if they're in a waiver program, that's a whole other training on how they can keep their Medicaid, such as CLASS or CDS or some of those other Texas waiver programs. There's probably about 16 ways to get Medicaid in Texas. So, okay, I must move on because you guys are too smart for me. Any other questions that aren't going to make me regret asking for questions?
There are some questions.
Okay, let's take just a few more. Let's take 2 more.
Okay, SSDI slide says does not have to over 18.
Oh, it should be does not have to be. Sorry. does not have to be 18 or does not have to be over 18. They can be younger, because remember, I went to work at 14. I lived in Iowa. I detasseled corn. I pulled weeds out of beans. I earned probably $8,000 in 1974 working on a farm. So I was paying in my credits, but I didn't have a disability, so I wasn't on it. But I'm just saying it's easy if you go to work young to pay in those credits before 18. So that's why the slide is in there with my poor English.
Okay, last question, Sandy. So they cannot have Medicaid and get Medicare?
No, I didn't say that. No, I didn't say that. What I'm saying is, somebody asked me about the 24-month waiting period to get on Medicare. Because remember, there's a 24-month waiting period to get Medicare on Title II. Somebody asked me, what do they do in those 24 months? And I said, if they're working, they can go ahead and apply and get Medicaid through the buy-in. And then if they're concurrent, then they can still have Medicaid and Medicare, because they're getting 2 checks. But Medicaid, that's a whole other training in itself, because when you ask me, can they have Medicaid and Medicare or just one? The answer is yes, because it depends on the person and the circumstances. Sometimes you can't have both, but there are ways of having one until the other kicks in also. Okay, any other questions? I told you guys this is a spider web, or it's an onion.
No, that's it.
Okay, all right. Okay, you know what I just did? This is me. I haven't forwarded a slide for so long that I went to forward my telephone. So, okay, now listen, guys, you don't need to know this, but you need to hear it at least once, and then you have your PowerPoints. But I still want you to try to grasp as much as you can. But if you don't, the next several slides just kind of tell you what happens when someone on Title II goes to work. You don't have to know this. There are experts who will help you for free to work with your students and families, okay? So everybody breathe. When they see the next few slides, usually people who don't need to know this but should hear it tend to freak out on me. So don't go deep with this. Just try to absorb what you can, okay? Remember, I said with Title II, you either receive all of your check or you don't receive any of it. There is no gradual reduction. It's all or nothing, okay? So Social Security is very aware that that's not a real big incentive when you're on Title II to go to work. Because if I go to work, when are you going to take my check? And what does that look like? And I'm not going to lie to you guys. It's not the easiest thing to understand. If I were a person with a disability or a child of a person with a disability and I didn't have my background, I would be so lost, because it's not easy. That's why I give you links to people who can help you make it easier. But I want you to at least have some kind of peripheral understanding, some just basic understanding of the difference between SSI and Title II. With SSI, remember, I pulled out that calculation sheet right away and we started doing the math. With Title II, because it's all or nothing, Social Security has way different programs. So that's what we're going to talk about now. What happens when somebody on Title II goes to work who has a disability? Now, I'm also going to give you a news flash. These guys may have had some work experience before they met you. Because they're transition age youth, probably not, but don't assume that they have all of these benefits left. That's why you want to connect any of your students who are working with what's called a WIPA, a Work Incentive Planning and Assistance person. So I want to give you guys breathing space before I start to know this is important, but you don't have to know it. You just need to get them connected, okay? So the first work incentive that Social Security came up with for Title II, because of all or nothing, is something called the trial work period. And it allows the beneficiary to go to work and to keep their work check and their full check without any issues. They get both. There's no overpayment. Doesn't matter how much the beneficiary earns, they still get their full Title II check, and they get to keep their paycheck. But what Social Security says is, we're going to let you do that, but we're going to be watching behind the scenes. And we want to know when you have earned enough money that we're going to count it as one of your 9 trial work period. One of your, let me try again to speak English. When this is one of those 9 trial work months where you went over, okay? And then when you went over, and I've counted to 9, it's like, okay, in January, I went over. That's 1 trial work month. And I didn't go over again until June. That's another trial work month. So they're kind of behind the scenes watching until you get 9 of those months where you went over. So they don't have to be consecutive. But then they count backwards from that 9th month to see if you did all 9 months in a 60-month period. Social Security talks in months, not years. If you want to say 5 years, 5 years is fine. It's 5 years, okay? So what do we know so far? The 9 months don't have to be consecutive. You don't need any work incentives that we're going to discuss, just simply because they're getting their check. There's no special trial work amount for people who are blind. And they count all your gross earnings. There's no way of reducing what they count. So they look at your full check, okay, before taxes. And you only get 1 trial work period per period of entitlement. What does that mean? If I'm on Title II and I get terminated for whatever reason, and I come back on, I get a new trial work period. But if I'm on trial work period for 50 years, I only still get 1 trial work period for that period of entitlement. Now, what is the limit? In 2022, it's gross wages of $910. So anytime I earn more than $910 before taxes in a month, Social Security is going to count that as one of those 9 months. Okay? And it's always gross. All right, so they have this thing called a rolling 60-month period. You know, there's a 5-day training that Cornell and VCU give to people like the WIPA staff so that they can become certified by Social Security's approved curriculum. And I worked for VCU for 12 years and went around the nation and trained, and every time I said rolling 60-month period, all they would do in the audience is roll their eyes. So what I want to do is I'm going to spend the next few slides explaining what a rolling 60-month period looks like, okay? So here is a calculation sheet, okay? And this is this person's gross earnings since 2011, all right? When they started to receive benefits until I met them in December, or let's say I maybe met them, I don't know, we'll just say January of 2017, right? And I filled in the rest of these blanks, okay? But every one of these numbers are the gross wage that the person I'm working with earned on that month and year. Now you'll notice on the far left, when you see the year, you'll also see a number under it. And that's because the trial work period amount increases most years. There are some years where America is not doing too good and they don't really increase it. But so that number is the number of what the trial work amount number or threshold was. So let's look at this. Again, I've done it for you. So in January of 2011, it was $720. Well, in that whole year, he only went over it once. The next year, he did it 2 times. The next year, he did it 3 times. The next year, he didn't do it at all. In 2015, he did it 2 times. And then in 2016, he did it one time, and that's why the red stops, because if you count all the red, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right. So I would take that 9th month, October of 2016, where it says $825, and I would count backwards until I hit 60 to see if it all fell in a 5-year period. And I'm not going to count with you because we don't have time, and I think you guys can all count. It comes to 62. So no, I did not complete the trial work period in a 60-month period. That doesn't mean my trial work period starts over. I didn't do it. What it means is, I got rid of a slide, so I shocked myself. What it means is this very first month, because remember, I'm counting backwards to 60, okay? So I get about here, and that's where 60 is. So 61, 62, all right? So this one, that's September of 2011, it just disappears like it didn't happen. And so now we have a new count. So now, since 740 on September 2011 is no longer the first trial work month because it didn't fall within the 60-month period, now June of 2012 is my first month. So what they do is, what was my 9th month, don't hate me, what was my 9th month is now my 8th month because 1 month fell off. So now this 825 is my 8th month. I'm still looking for that 9th month. Well, on the next month, they're over again because the trial work amount is 810 and this is 850 in November. So now this is my 9th month. And when I count backwards, again, which I'm not going to do, but I would count backwards to June of 2012. And when I get to June of 2012, it's only 54 months. So at that point, my trial work period is over. Okay, so that's what a rolling 60-month period looks like. When I first think I know what my 9th month is, I find out by counting backwards that it did not fall in that 60-month window. So that one falls off, and then this one becomes 1, and what was 9 becomes 8. But this right here, November of 2016, where it's 850 in purple, that is the end of my trial work period. I will take one question on this because I don't need you to know it, but just in case for giggles, if there's a question, I will humorously take it. Vanessa, is there anything?
Yeah, there's one question. I don't think it's specific to the chart.
Okay, let's go on then. Let's go on then because I don't want to change. I don't want to change the mindset. So now this chart shows when the trial work period began, June 2012, because the other one dropped off, and it ended November 2016 because that was within a 60-month window. So what the heck happens next? Is that all they get? And during that trial work period time, remember, all of those years, they're getting an SSI, or they're getting a Title II check and their work check. It's a trial work period. So that's at least 5 years that this person is trying to go to work and still getting their full Title II check with no reductions. Okay, so is that it? And the answer is no. There's still more of a work incentive under Title II to go to work. And what this one is called is the extended period of eligibility. And what it says is this starts the month after the end of the trial work period. And this one, rather than being rolling, this one goes for 36 months, period. It doesn't care what you're doing. You can be not working for 36 months, and just because you're not working doesn't stop the clock. It starts the month following the end of your trial work period, and it ends 36 months later regardless. Okay? But now they're not looking at a trial work period amount, they're looking at this thing, I think I went too fast, called substantial gainful activity. That's what that SGA stands for. And I apologize for not spelling that out. I've used the slides for other things and I knew they knew the acronym. So now we're not, forget that trial work period amount. Now we're looking at something of substantial gainful activity. And are your countable, not gross, but countable earnings above or below that amount? And those amounts in 2020 are, if you are not blind, it's $1,260 of countable income. And we're going to get to what I mean by countable in a minute, so don't type it as a question. And if you're blind, here's those advocates again. If your disability is stat blind, your substantial gainful activity, your countable income is above $2,110. Remember, good advocate. Social Security does not believe that having blindness is the worst disability in the world. They just had the best advocates. So we're looking at the same exact chart. But now you're seeing all these numbers are in yellow. And that's because if you count them, that is my trial, or that's my extended period of eligibility. The month following the end of my trial work period. Remember the trial work period, November of 2016, it was over. So immediately the next month, I start my 36 months count, okay? Now when you look at the numbers, you're gonna see there's two numbers, all right? Because those are the numbers for what the SGA was in those years, okay? Now, during the EPE in 2016, I'm going to use the lower number because we work with people who have disability, other disabilities outside of stat blind, more than stat blind. So in 2016, now I'm looking for, given all the calculations that we're going to teach you before this day is over, is my countable income, so now the yellow starts countable income, above or below 1,130. Well, I'm going to give you a hint that because all of these numbers are low, during the trial or during the extended period of eligibility, it never went above the countable SGA. Okay, so during this 36-month period, I'm still getting my full check and I'm still getting my full Title II check because I'm not going over the countable SGA amounts. Okay, so now I've got almost 9 years where I'm still getting my check, 8 years where I'm still getting my check for sure. The extended period of eligibility though, let's say, let's just pick a date. Let's say in May of 2017, that $799 instead says $1,799. Social Security says, all right, you're over, but we're going to see if you're over and you have a consistent pattern, okay? A consistent pattern of over SGA, that's called cessation and grace, okay? If I have though, take a breath, because I want you to get this, but you don't have to memorize this. If during the EPE, let's say that in May of 2017, this was $1,799, this was $1,730, this was $1,800. For these 3 months that I'm over, I would still get my check. But then what I'm going to talk to you about next would be over. The reason you don't see it over here is because so many people think it needs to happen in the EPE or happen right after the EPE, this extended period of eligibility, that they get confused. So I don't tend to teach it that it happens. But if it did happen in the EPE, nothing's going to happen. Those 3 months, you're still getting a check. And you're still eligible, should you go under, to continue your check under something called cessation and grace period. What that just means is simply that I am showing a pattern of being able to earn above SGA, even though it's countable income, not just gross. And because of that, if it happens in the EPE, I still get a check, but my cessation and grace period's over because it's 3 consecutive months. And it starts the first time I go over SGA. But after SGA, if it happens after the EPE, you're terminated. Okay, so let's review this chart. We have the EPE up here in red, or I'm sorry, we have the trial work period months in red. We have the extended period of eligibility, those 36 consecutive months, in yellow, where we start looking at countable income above a certain threshold. So when I end my EPE in this example, I've never had cessation and grace. I'm still well below the $1,220 that's allowed for countable. So even though I have worked this many years, I'm still getting my check and I'm still getting my earnings check from my job. And so what happens after the EPE, because I haven't used this cessation and grace yet, is I'm moseying along. Now I'm into 2020 and I'm not, and I'm not, and I'm not. And then they hire me because the holidays are coming and now I'm over. $1,270 of countable income is over the substantial gainful activity amount of $1,260. It's only 10 bucks, but it's over. But you see here, I'm showing a consistent pattern of being over. These 3 months in blue are that cessation and grace period where they're just watching to see if I'm doing a pattern. I still get my check even though I'm over. And I still get my paycheck even though I'm over for 3 consecutive months, cessation and grace. But that 4th month right here, December of 2020, I am now terminated because I have exhausted my trial work period, I've exhausted my extended period of eligibility, and I've had my cessation and grace period. Again, I could end my EPE and be terminated the next month if I had my cessation and grace in the extended period of eligibility during these yellow areas. And then this month would have been over SGA. This would be my termination month if it had occurred in EPE. Now everybody's head is swimming and everybody's cursing that they signed on because they could be watching General Hospital right now or something. But it's okay because you don't need to know this. What I need you to take away from this is they have at least 5 years, okay? Because they have they have at least 5 years between the trial work period and the EPE to try to work. And after 5 years, people can kind of figure out, you know, what their job preference is, you know, what their skill set is, what their interest is, what their support needs are. But remember, when we ended the trial work period, we started talking about countable income. So we're going to spend the rest of our time looking at countable. Before we go there, if anybody's brave enough, is there a question in regards to the charts that we just did?
There's not one yet.
That's because y'all are rolling over, begging God's mercy, wondering what this woman's talking about. Remember, I didn't tell you that you had to learn it. What you have to know is you can go to work and keep your benefits because of that trial work period without even worrying about it. And during the EPE, if you go to work, it's okay because if you go over, you can go right back on because it's like a safety net. But your number one thing you need to know is when somebody on Title II goes to work, you need to call a WIPA project. So when you're looking at substantial gainful activity.
Sandy, excuse me. So we took a break the other day. I don't know how much you have left. Do we have time for a 5-minute break or do you want to just keep going?
No, let's go ahead and take a break. I think we're good.
Okay, so we'll take a 5-minute break and we'll be back about 2 o'clock.
Okay, that'll work.
All right.
Vanessa, if you're on, can you tell me how many questions we have that were different from what we were talking about at the time?
So far, we have 2.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
All right, I just want to keep track, so I want to try to get as many answered today as I can.
Okay.
I think when we start, I'll take those 2 questions, Vanessa.
Okay. All right. Sounds
Yeah.
good.
Okay, we have about 1 more minute, and then I'm going to start yapping again. Okay, Vanessa said that there were about 2 questions, and I thought before we kind of shifted your brain one more time, if it'll shift one more time, I would go ahead and take those 2 questions. So Vanessa, fire away.
Okay, so the first question, what if they are receiving both SSI and SSDI and working? Would they lose both, one, or would they keep both checks?
Okay. That's where the WIPA comes in, because it's quite a dance. That's a great question, because you guys are really thinking through it. First of all, don't send any student to work, or if they're working, without connecting them with WIPA if they are receiving a benefit. But the answer is kind of 3 or 4 or 5 folded. If you remember, yesterday or Tuesday we talked about SSI and had that calculation sheet. And then today I interviews to that other sheet trying to track the trial work period and the extended period of eligibility. When you have someone who has SSDI and SSI, they're a concurrent beneficiary, you always start with Title II first on if they're getting their whole check or no check, because that's going to tell you what to put on step 1 of the calculation sheet. So the answer, your answer is, I don't know, it depends on the person, but that's not the answer you want. The explanation is, first you do the Title II sheet. Are they in their trial work period? Are they getting a check? Are they in their EPE or after their EPE, but they're below SGA? Are they getting a check? Okay, that's what it all has to do with, on how much the earnings are, is going to impact SSI and their Title II check differently. SSI is that gradual reduction we did Tuesday. Title II is a yes/no question. Are they getting a check or aren't they getting a check? The reason you want to do Title II first is because Title II is what goes on step 1 of the SSI sheet. So depending on how much their wages are, it'll affect it differently. But remember, Tuesday when I talked about SSI, if they go to work and they lose their SSI check, they get to keep their Medicaid through that 1619B. And chances are that they're probably in their extended period of eligibility or something where they still might be getting a check for Title II. So I can't answer that question because it's really a matter of knowing where they're at in the Title II world and determining if it's yes, they get a check, or no, they don't get a check, and then doing the SSI calculation sheet to see what it does to that cash benefit. It's a long answer because there's not a yes or no answer to your question. Okay? Depends on how much they earn. Last question.
Can you tell us what WIPA stands for and how do we find the WIPA person in our area?
Sure, I am proud to do that. WIPA stands for Work Incentive Planning and Assistance. They have been around since 1999. They're a program that was enacted through Congress because Social Security has so many people who are on benefits they couldn't possibly keep up. And Congress was noticing that we were getting more beneficiaries on the roll than that were coming off the roll. So they asked Social Security to contract with, to put an RFP out, and Virginia Commonwealth University got it. And then they put an RFP out for people around the state who kind of maybe know a little bit about this stuff. We sat in, back then it was a 7-day training, 8 hours a day, learning this stuff. And so every county in every state and every territory has a counselor who's been certified through Virginia Commonwealth University on curriculum that was approved by Social Security. And we are mandated to cover these counties for free and do it on an individualized basis. So that's why I'm saying you want no student to go to school or to go to work who is not connected with the WIPA program. Okay, and how will you find your WIPA? It's on my slide that I'm going to get to right at the end, so stay tuned. And I'll show you even how to pull it up and find it. So any other questions, Vanessa? If not, we're going to move on.
Nope, that's it, Sandy.
Okay, so remember when we finished the trial work period? You probably don't, but we did. And we started talking about the extended period of eligibility, and I brought this weird phrase in, substantial gainful activity. And that's kind of Social Security's words to say we're no longer counting gross wages. Now we're going to look at how much we want to count using some work incentives. So now we're looking at countable wages. We're not going to count all of the gross wages. And some of those tools, we're going to talk about the top 2 today. And the reason we're not talking about the bottom 2 is because that's something Social Security does automatically, that the computer initiates, and because you guys are kind of an outsider helping families and students, I'm not even going to go there with you today because I want you to like me by the end of this training. But I do want you to know that there are work incentives that help reduce the gross wages when they're making that yes/no determination once the EPE starts, and that substantial gainful activity, that countable income, goes through until they die or terminate. They never go back to anything else but countable wages. And how they decide what to count is by looking at some of these programs, and that's what we're going to do now, okay? This one is called a subsidy and special conditions. And this one I don't necessarily like the title too much because it has to do with your employer. And an employer thinks subsidy, they think they're getting something for this. And you know, they're not. Subsidy means of what the employer is amending for you to work there. We're not going to count that. So just kind of stick with that topic, okay? So let's say I don't know if any of you have actually met me or just heard me drone on in webinars, but my favorite thing to drink is like McDonald's Diet Coke, even at 59. I think they have the freshest, best Diet Coke in the nation. So I always use the example in this part of the training to say, okay, so my name is Sandy and I acquire a disability and you get me a job at McDonald's and I am a happy camper, okay? But when you get the job, the employer might have some concerns, but willing to work with us because I require extra assistance to get something. Like maybe I'm cleaning the bathrooms or the front end, but I'm not very good at mixing the chemicals, or somebody needs to go behind me to kind of finish the job. Or maybe I have less of a production rate or fewer jobs than other people who are also working at McDonald's. We're all receiving around the same amount of pay, but due to my disability, the employer, not me, the employer makes a decision that because my disability has me kind of shaking and I can't necessarily control it, maybe I don't have to drop the French fries, okay? And maybe I get assistance cleaning the bathroom, and then I get somebody who goes behind me to help me do the front end, and I don't have to do the cash register because I'm not good with money. Maybe I get more breaks, or I have to go to the doctor more than is usually allowed, but all of those are kind of accommodated. Okay, so I named 5 things that my employer is doing for me, right? So now let's pretend for easy math that I have 10 things on my job description working at McDonald's. And everybody I work with has 10 things on their job description. And we're earning the same amount of pay. But if my employer didn't accommodate those 5 areas, I wouldn't be able to keep my job. Okay, so that's called a subsidy. So let's say, for instance, I earn $2,000 a month at McDonald's. I don't know how much they earn, but let's just say, for the sake of easy math, I earn $2,000 a month at McDonald's. Well, am I over SGA? Well, let's see what the SGA is for 2020, and it is 2010. So I need to change my scenario. Let's say I earn $2,500. Okay. All right. So Social Security is going to say, well, you're over our substantial gainful activity. Your income is too high. And then I will ask my employer to take my job description, highlight those areas that he accommodates, and maybe put a cover letter on it, something that I can send to Social Security, or Social Security will request it from the employer. Okay, so now Social Security gets this thing from my employer saying 5 of those 10 job requirements to work at McDonald's are accommodated somehow. Well, 5 of 10 is 50%. So I have an apple and an orange up there. I wonder how many people, while I've been yapping on, thought, why does she have an apple and an orange up there? Because I want to compare apples to apples, not apples to oranges. And in this case, I wouldn't have my job if this particular manager didn't accommodate these 5 things that he wasn't comfortable with. He was still willing to pay me the salary, but for his own comfort and liability, he doesn't want me to do these 5 things. Okay? So Social Security says, well, okay, but compare apples to apples, we can't count then 50% of your wages. So my $2,500 a month gross, when they count it, it's $1,250. It is below SGA. So on those little squares where we were filling out the number, I wouldn't put $2,500. I would put $1,250, and I would get a check that month because my countable income is below SGA, even though I'm well above. Now, this special condition has to do mostly with family-owned businesses, to where my mom and dad own a grocery store and they pay me, but they pay me a salary far higher than my work output. Social Security works with the family to come up with a percentage, and then that percentage is what they would count for my wages of what I'm actually producing, comparing apples to apples, not apples to oranges, okay? Now, we are not going to use the subsidy during that trial work period, that first part of the calendar that I showed you, because remember they're always looking at gross wages, and I'm getting my check anyhow. This doesn't kick in until the extended period of eligibility starts after that trial work period, and only if I'm above SGA. You know, in 2020, the, I thought 2000 was good. I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong one. The SGA for people who are not blind is $1,260, so my scenario goes out the window. But what happens is if I'm only earning $800 a month gross, I don't need a subsidy because I'm below what the threshold is. So only if I'm over the threshold would I need a subsidy from my family or from an employer. And I apologize, I went blank on what the number was, and I looked fast and I looked at those who are stat blind. So in my scenario, the $2,000 would work because it's over the SGA rate of $1,260, and they would still take half of that. So the end result is the same, but in my little ADHD, I messed that up. So again, we don't just use a subsidy because they're now looking at SGA. We only use a subsidy when, just a second, what did I just miss here? Oh my gosh, I'm missing a slide. Okay, so I'm going to stay here. I'm only going to use a subsidy when I am over that countable amount for that year. Now, where I got stunned when I saw the next slide, and I still don't understand why I do this because I do this presentation all the time, I don't know how it got off, is remember yesterday, right at the end, we kind of rushed. So this is probably a good time to revisit it. Those last couple of work incentives we had to kind of go fast through. And one was called an impairment related work expense. Remember, I have an impairment and I've got out-of-pocket expenses related to that impairment that I need to pay for, that no one pays me back for, so that I can go to work. Well, what should be here is impairment related work expense, because it is the only work incentive that crosses titles. I can use it for SSI and I can use it for the disability programs under Title II. And remember you probably don't remember, but it's okay, you can pretend like you do. Remember when we were talking about the impairment related work expense and I showed you the calculation sheet and it became before the divide by 2, and I said, oh, you know, you only get credit for 50% because you have to add the impairment related work expense amount before the divide by 2. So it's not great, but it's something. Well, here we don't have a calculation sheet. So let's go back to my my scenario of me working at McDonald's. Let's say I work at McDonald's and I'm earning $1,500 a month and my employer doesn't give me a subsidy. He doesn't. He's like, no, you don't need no subsidy. You're fine. You can't do it. You don't have to work here. But I have out-of-pocket expenses that are related to my disability. So if I earn $1,500 a month and I have $300 a month in out-of-pocket expenses, and I can do the same thing, send the letter to Social Security itemizing what my costs are, and they approve it, well, that's going to take my countable earning down to $1,200. So that's below SGA. So I get my check, even though I don't have the employer subsidy, I have an IRWI. Okay. So let's just pretend big. All right. Let's pretend McDonald's pays you $4,000 a month. Right. And the only reason I'm saying that is because you can have a subsidy and an IRWI at the same time. So I can have my 50% subsidy and I can have my IRWI as long as it takes me down below SGA. Now, if I'm above SGA and let's say I'm at that $1,500 and the employer only gives me a 10% subsidy and I don't have any out-of-pocket expenses, there's no reason to submit the subsidy because the subsidy isn't big enough to take me below that substantial gainful activity threshold amount. So, but there are ways of earning more than that substantial gainful activity amount. Again, of 1,260. You don't want to tell your person on Title II that's the most you can earn or you're going to lose your check, because they don't count it all. It all depends on, do you have a subsidy? Do you have an impairment related work expense or expenses? So it is fine to go above that number. That's why I like to take some time to stress what I mean by countable. Okay, so we only want to use it when we're above. Now, Medicare, remember 24-month waiting period. This is like federal health insurance. That's why there's the waiting period. But there's two people who get Medicare and can have Medicare without actually even getting a Title II check. And those are people who have end-stage renal disease. They're in permanent kidney failure and they're requiring dialysis and they're awaiting a transplant, or they have ASL, better known as Lou Gehrig's disease. So those two people you may meet as a student. Normally you don't. Most people that we work with do have that 24-month waiting period, but we have had people in end-stage renal disease and ASL. And under end-stage renal, they're allowed to keep their Medicaid or Medicare until 12 months after the transplant to make sure that the transplant takes hold. And with Lou Gehrig's disease, you get it through your entire life. There is no end game for Lou Gehrig's disease as far as 12 months after this or 6 months after that. So everything you needed to know about Medicare you learned in kindergarten because it's A, B, C, and D. Part A, when you get Medicare and you've done your 24-month waiting period, Part A is automatic and it's free. There's no cost to you, and that's your hospital insurance. Now here's something, remember I told you I would tell you when you need to pay attention. Because if you hear a parent or a student saying they're starting to get their Medicare, what Social Security is going to do, or the Medicare department is going to do when you're eligible, they're going to send you your Medicare Part A and Part B card. Well, if you have comparable insurance, such as Medicaid, you don't need Part B because Part B comes with a cost and it's over $100. So you need to send that card back, and that will be their cue that you don't want Part B. Now, just because you want the $149 doesn't mean you should turn down Part B, because if you turn down Part B and you don't have comparable insurance, there's a penalty for every month that you should have taken Part B, and it's steep. So Medicare Part A is free, it's automatic. Part B, you want to have the $149 comes right off your Title II check to cover the amount of Part B. And there are other ways for that Part B to be taken care of that I'm not going in there, but just know that Part B is optional. Part C, you probably won't need with most of the people you're working at. That's your Advantage plans. But Part D is important. If they're not on SSI and they don't have those 3 Medicaid slots, you might want to make sure the parents are enrolling them in a drug program, a prescription program to get their drugs. Now, this isn't automatic. The parents have to make an effort to choose a provider, choose a plan, and go ahead on and get on it. Okay? So Medicare, 24 months. You guys are dying to know how to find your WIPA, so I'm going to take your questions while I put this on the screen. If you don't have your PowerPoint, I'm going to explain the first 2 bullets, but the 3rd bullet is the WIPA project. You go to this link. You click option B, you type in your zip code and the contact information will pop up to who covers your county. We love transition age youth. We're actually supposed to target transition age youth. And hopefully when you type in the zip code, it'll pop up Imagine Enterprises, because that's us. And we have 149 counties in Texas, so your odds are good and your goods are odd. So with that, I'm going to stop and let you kind of look at the screen. And Vanessa, are there any questions?
Yes, so we have one question. Is there an age limit to use the WIPA?
No. Oh, well, retirement. Once you're actually retired, we're done. When you've hit full retirement. But as far as young, they have to be transition age youth, which I think in Texas is 14.
Okay.
That was it?
No, next question. One more question.
I was gonna say, okay.
So I feel stupid asking this, but can you explain the difference between Medicaid and Medicare, please?
Sure. Let me think how I'm going to do this. Okay, so Medicaid is like the brass ring because it is for people who have limited income and resources. So it covers a lot, okay? People want Medicaid because if you can find a Medicaid doctor, it's usually free health care, okay? Finding the doctor is the key though, because Medicaid's not made it friendly for doctors, so doctors are dropping people with Medicaid left and right. So you have to find a Medicaid provider, but it's free, and you get 3 drug slots where your prescriptions are free. So this one's free, free, free. Medicare is not free. Part A is free, but Part B comes with a premium. You have to pay for those out of hospital appointments. I lost my words. And Part D, your prescription plan, might come with its own premium too, depending on which program you do, okay? Medicare covers about 80%. That's where that Medicare Part C comes in, those advantage programs that kind of fill in the gaps, okay? And Medicare, if you have both Medicare and Medicaid, Medicare will be billed first, because remember, Medicaid, like SSI, pays last, always. Because those are needs-based. There's the link of poverty associated with those, okay? The other thing too, before you type your question, if you're gonna ask me what happens if you have employer insurance, I know SSI or Medicaid will always come last. Medicare will be first or second, depending on how many employees that employer has. And don't ask me what the number is, because I don't carry that in my head, because as I'm older, I have to dump certain information, but I can find it for you if you want to type it as a question. Are there any other questions?
Let's see. Yes. So if my students get Medicaid and probably does not need Medicare?
Oh yeah, you're not getting Medicare unless you become eligible for Title II. You can't just say, okay, well, I'm glad I get SSI, but can I have Medicare instead of Medicaid? You can't do that. The only way you're getting Medicare is to retire or have some other disability related benefit under Title II. Yeah, if somebody has Medicaid, they don't really need Medicare. Although remember, I talked about someone who's concurrent who has Title II and SSI checks, so they get Medicaid and Medicare. I mean, they don't really need to use their Medicare Part A because Medicaid's going to cover it. But remember, Medicaid is the payer of last resort, so any hospital stay will be covered by Medicare Part A, and it's free. But there is no reason to have Part B where there is a cost. You can decline that coverage because you have comparable insurance.
Okay.
Anything else?
That's it.
Okay, well, I'm going to go one more slide because this is important to Vanessa, and that is your evaluation link. So I'm going to leave this up for the remainder. I want to thank you guys for your time. Please don't be overwhelmed by the information I gave you, because I did not train you at a speed or with the information necessary for you to go out and do this. What I did do is try to emphasize the slides that are important for you to remember and when to connect with parents. Age 18 is critical. Getting a job is critical. Okay, and when they get a job, make sure that they're reporting by the 6th of the following month. I go to work in January, I have to report my wages by February 6th. Why is that date important? Because if it's after that, you could cause an overpayment, and then the families won't trust you and they won't let you get little Johnny or little Sandy a job. So we want to keep the parents good. Thank you guys for not asking individual questions, because there were a few where I had to say yes and maybe and I don't know, because every case is individual. It's not a cookie cutter program. Anything else?
Nope, no other questions.
All right, well, Vanessa, if you want to wrap it up, I think they've had enough time. I'm going to show you my last slide that has my email address on it. It's pretty easy, sandy.smith@imagine-enterprises.org. That .org, a lot of email gets lost because we miss the .org. So sandy.smith@imagine-enterprises.org. And then if anybody wants me to go back to the other slide with the evaluation, let me know, because I've got 2 minutes to show it.
Sandy, since you have the PowerPoint, you cut and paste that evaluation link in the chat?
Yeah, it's right here. Oh, cut and paste it in the chat. I see what you're saying. Okay. I've got to exit out of my show though, because it won't let me. It won't let me do this. Copy. Now I got to find the chat. Oh, Eric, I don't see the chat.
On the bottom, and you scroll down to the bottom, maybe you like have to click down there. Well, something should pop up where you should see the chat.
Okay,
yeah.
Hold on. I'm going to get rid of my screen so I can see. Oh, no, that didn't work.
Well, I'll be sending the link out to participants as well, if you can't figure that out.
Yeah, well, I got 1 minute to figure this out. So.
Someone did it.
Somebody did it for me. Thank you so much, Janine.
Oh, there it is. No, I just found it. I wanted to be the hero. All right, well, never mind. Thank you to whoever helped me. So you guys, it's been fun. Even though I didn't get to hear your voice, I got to see some of your beautiful faces. And hopefully Vanessa and I can work out some other areas that you want to hear again or in deeper detail. Find your WIPA. Find your WIPA. That's the key.
Thank you all so much, and we appreciate your time this afternoon.